I'm a university student and live in a rental house with 5 other people. It is far from ideal, but in this housing outcry that we're living in, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month to exist in a box. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 roommates I had were all out for the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with the volume loud, taking long-ass showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc. It was around 10 p.m. I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like there was something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on our porch, so I assumed that to be the case. After hearing some fumbling the second time, I went over to check through the window. There was nothing there. As I'm turning to head back to the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized control of me again, and I locked the door back. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was still locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time my grandma's words came into my head about something her own mother had told her. If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. I shut the lights off in the living room and managed to turn the TV off, which was hard because my hands were shaking. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonating at this time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom and had turned all of the lights out in the house as I passed them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. Don't know if there was more than one person or if they realized they couldn't jump the fence to get into the backyard. While calling for emergency services on speaker, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know that's probably one of the most Canadian things I could say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark holding my makeshift spear for what was probably about 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't being murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me police were coming, which they eventually did. Took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was that I heard knocking on the door downstairs, and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would have had to come in and physically pull me out of the room. A very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the rest of the weekend. I made an appointment with a doctor to get on anxiety medicine, as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in any physical danger at that point, but I've had some very charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was just finding it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but I'm human. Meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house with wall-to-wall people again. And honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. I grew up in the 1990s, born in the late 80s, and I remember getting my first bike and starting to explore the area in which I grew up in upstate New York. Where I grew up is much different now. In the 90s, it was more rural with clusters of neighborhoods here and there. I lived near an old capped landfill, and the main road connected a lot of semis down to some factories in a neighboring town, which was like a 5-minute bike ride. We also had an old Baptist church that was founded by an eccentric former hippie who was really good to the community. My dad, who was a very serious drinker, loved to fish, hunt, etc. with his friend because it gave him an excuse to drink and kill something. But he ended up making this deal with this pastor and the gentleman who owned a pond behind the church to stock it with fish. As at the time, my dad and his friends started becoming serious competitive fishers and went in on a boat, which my dad had to sell his share to eventually to keep drinking. So my friends and I had permission to fish there in the summer, and we would go down and swim and all that. I lived easily less than 5 minutes from this pond, and my friends and I go out there one summer day. This was around 1995. My mom had heard on the news a week prior about a wave of kidnappings. I don't remember if Amber Alerts were a thing then, so she decided to make a code word with me. She came to me and told me that if anyone ever tried to convince me that they knew my mom or dad in the hopes to get me to get in their car, to ask them for a code word. Ours was pickles. So fast forward to our fishing trips. My friends leave before me after we sat around and actually just swam more than anything. My friend Dennis got mad because he was serious about fishing, so he and his brother left, and I was alone on the road, as the road, once you got past this farm, was a straight shot to the main part of town, and our road was on the right just before the road ended. So I get to my road and am about to turn, and I didn't notice I was being followed by a beige-colored pickup with this Cletus-looking guy from The Simpsons in it. He greets me and tells me that my mom and dad are waiting for us at this local restaurant, which I knew. He tells me that they asked him to come get me and meet them there so we can all have dinner. Immediately thought of what my mom said, and I started getting this evil feeling like I was in danger. So I told him that my parents specifically have a password that they give their friends, and that if he was their friend, he was required to tell me, at which point he got mad and started swearing at me, although I didn't see one, but I was certain he had a gun as he started fumbling in the truck. I turned and started pedaling down my road screaming for help and that I was in danger. He jerked his truck to follow, but I was making too much noise and was already to my house that he just took off. When I got home, my mom was home, and I was hysterical and asked her why she would ask such a mean friend to pick me up. And I told her what happened, and she didn't believe me, and she calmed me down, told me I did the right thing but could tell she had a hard time believing me. She also grew up in the same town, and nothing like that had happened to her. A few days later, a friend of hers tells her a similar story about her son on another part of our town. The police then were involved, and the cops came and talked to me, and I gave them the same description of the man, truck, what had happened, etc. I don't know if the guy was ever caught. I used to be very bitter at my mom for not believing me, but I now understand the confusion she had, and instead of reacting, she just tried to console me and keep an eye on everything. My dad, on the other hand, was more vigilant about it and would ask me all the time when he'd take me out if someone looked like that guy, or if a truck looked the same as the one I saw. I hope no other kids were harmed by him. This happened when I was in my early 20s. My best friend was always getting into risky situations. While she did various drugs, I was always more of a pothead. When they said pot was a gateway drug, I believe it's true to a certain extent for those with addictive personalities. She definitely developed an addiction issue later on. My friend, her name was KK, was always down to meet people. She used to friend random people on Facebook or Instagram. She would ask me to hang out so that way when she met people, I was the buffer just in case they didn't like each other. One day she came over to my house unannounced and was like, "Hey, let's go to my uncle's house because her aunt was there and her aunt had some goods." Her aunt's place happened to be down the road. Her aunt and her uncle were known as dealers in the area. So we went. When we got there, she was like, "Hey, I met this guy online, he goes by Joey Crack." Then she shows her aunt his pictures, a wide-set man with a red goofy face, cornrow braids, face tattoos, and a gold grill. I laughed and said, "Wow, Kay, you really know how to pick 'em." She had already invited him over, so upon his arrival he just walks right up and gives Kay a hug and everyone else there a kiss on the cheek. This part of town had nothing around, just houses, a school, and woods. The closest store was about 20 minutes away, so it struck me as odd that he walked here. So it was me, Kay, her aunt, and the aunt's friend. We sit and get 3 joints in rotation. By this time, both aunts are high as a kite on coke. They take a few puffs, then go inside the house, leaving me, Kay, and Joey Crack outside. Joey then starts asking us questions like how we know each other, what we do for a living, etc. It was getting late, so I was telling her I was going to go home. She was like, "No, don't go yet." I told her I was tired and that Joey is weird and he kept low-key hitting on me. She then tells me he asked to sleep with her and he wanted to ask her to ask if I was down. I laughed it off and said, "You're crazy." After a while of silence, I deflected and heard some noise that was in the darkness. "Did you hear that?" After a bit of small talk between him and Kay, he then learned that neither one of us was interested. It was just a hangout. This then turns the mood. You can feel it. It was suddenly eerily quiet. He got reserved and shifty-eyed. I sat down for a while just to please Kay. At one point I turned to Joey, knowing he walked here and it was dark by now, and asked, "What are you gonna do? Because I'm about to go home and Kay's coming with me." He replied, "I just texted my boy. He's about to come get me." When he was texting, Kay was right behind him watching him text. Her eyes grew wide and she looked at me. That was silent girl code for bitch, what the heck? Kay broke the silence and was like, "Hey, come help me get his things from inside to bring them out." So I did. We went inside and she was like, "I'm going to call my uncle so he can take us to your place." I asked why, because my house was like a 10-minute walk. She said because when she was looking at Joey's text, he sent to whoever was coming to pick him up the information of all of us here. He noted that her aunts were high on coke, as us along with our age. He was telling his boy to come over to basically rob and assault us. And he called dibs on the blonde one. I was the blonde one. Every hair stood up on my body at the thought of some gross goon trying to have his way with me. I was mad because she got me into this shit. We came back out and continued our conversation with him so he wouldn't get suspicious of us. She mentioned out loud that her uncle was on his way home. As he pulls in, a sigh of relief comes over me. They speak briefly, and Joey then departs into the darkness before his ride even shows up. Kay and I get a ride from her uncle to my house. On the ride, we noted how weird Joey was. Later that night, as I was going to bed, I check my Facebook, and I have a friend request from Joey and a message. "You're so pretty. I would love some alone time with you without your friend." The message ended with his number. I never blocked someone so fast. After this, Kay didn't learn her lesson, but that's another story for another time. A week later, Joey was in the news. He was wanted for sexual assault, robbery, and drug possession,